Welcome, everybody. I'm Ray Mayetta, and we're excited to be here today with our friend and colleague, Mark Vagle. And we're going to be talking about a course he's teaching for us at this year's Summer Intensive, our 23rd annual Summer Intensive. It's called Learning from Lived Experience Cultivates Your Qualitative Mind. It's July 30th and 31st, so we're going to get more into that. I not only run ResearchTalk, will be 30 years in April 1st. Time goes quickly, but I'm a sociologist primarily interested in studying personal relationships, but with my clients have just had the gift of studying almost anything qualitatively. But we're doing this study on lifelong friendship now, interviewing dyads who've been friends for at least 20 years. We had this powerful interview with two women who were friends for 60 years, and we just sit and have a conversation, and Allison, my colleague, and I almost say nothing. They just tell these great stories, roller coaster, tears, laughter, all this stuff, and it's just a fun, informative time. So that's me, and I'm going to ask my colleague Paul Mijas to introduce himself, and then we'll have Jeff do the same, and we'll give the floor to Mark.
Thanks. I'm Paul Mijas. I'm a qualitative researcher and consultant at the Odom Institute for Research and Social Science at UNC Chapel Hill, and I've also been a consultant with ResearchTalk since 2001.
And Paul is gifted in many, many ways, especially as a teacher. And if you look at the Summer Intensive schedule, you'll see a link for that with the video. He's teaching a course for us, co-teaching with the wonderful Karen Campbell. So take a look for that. Jeff.
Thanks, Ray. I'm Jeff Petruzzelli. I've been with ResearchTalk since 2001 as a qualitative research specialist.
All right. Thank you, Jeff. And Mark, if you want to tell us a little bit about yourself and kind of coming to the course.
Thanks, Ray. I'm Mark Vagle. So excited to be here once again. I'm a professor of education in the Department of Curriculum Instruction at the University of Minnesota in the Twin Cities. Prior to that, I was in a similar professorship at the University of Georgia in Athens, Georgia. I've been doing a lot of work, learning about, teaching about, mentoring, writing about, using phenomenological research methodologies in particular. I also work with folks across multiple qualitative methodologies, both here at the University of Minnesota and nationally and internationally, doing some consulting with folks as they're learning about, applying, using, puzzling over how to inquire qualitatively, both in a reflective way, but then also in a very concrete application. How do I do this thing that I'm drawn to in and over time? And so I'm excited to be here and excited to teach once again this summer.
You know, it's amazing, Mark. One of the things that I truly admire about you is that your mind on this stuff just dances so comfortably and elegantly, integrates the theoretical and the practical. It's like, it seems like when you work through this and imagine the work of others that you're helping, your own work, that you can envision those two as separate, which is just so powerful. So
thank you.
Yeah. So we, for the intensive, our event committee has got to work through, we have 18 courses and we have a group of courses, a cluster we call Refining Your Qualitative Lens. Your course is in that, and certainly for folks who've been doing this a while, this is not an intro course. It could be an intro course, but this could also be a reorientation. And I almost think that, you know, while we've been asking others who are teaching courses in this group to tell us about how their courses would refine your qualitative lens, but just if you could just think aloud about not just refining someone's qualitative lens, but even shaping it. And the stuff you're putting forward in this course applies traditions, not traditions, approaches, all this stuff. So let me just give it to you for kind of a qualitative lens coming to be and evolving.
Great, thanks. It's exciting to have done some imagining and then working with you all to see how we can put this course forward as a new course right now. I think at this point in my career, and I've got quite a few years left doing this, and though I've been at it long enough, I guess it's very soon, like within a month, it'll have been 20 years since I defended my dissertation. And reflecting back on a couple decades of doing this work in earnest around qualitative research and inquiry, this idea of both shaping and refining our qualitative mind and mindset and how we move through it. I've been aware of in different ways over those 20 plus years, including my PhD program. And my awareness now is this version, I guess, of my awareness is feeling as though we have to simultaneously tend to ourselves in terms of how we see, what we notice about our own perceptivity and how we experience carrying out the qualitative inquiry. And there's this metaphor of like, let's remember we're human beings, not just human doings. And so this idea of there's all sorts of things we have to learn how and what to do qualitatively. So I try to, and then there's the ways in which we do it and how we learn about ourselves as qualitative researchers as we're in the doing and the being of it. And so concretely speaking, I think part of the shaping and refining is just being willing to notice. So what do we notice when we interview? Not only what we're learning from our participants, which of course is central and essential, but what do we notice about the moves we make and don't make, and our ability to be more or less present as listeners, especially if the type of interviewing we're doing is less structured and more conversational and open-ended. And even when it's more structured, we're still making decisions and choices that are based on what we perceive, what we hear, what we don't hear, what's framing or influencing what we hear and don't hear. So part of the shaping and refining is to think in both terms all the time. Meaning think of what we do, how we do it, and what we notice as we're doing it. And this course will work both together. We'll work with real concrete how questions and simultaneously, what do we notice as we're enacting whatever we've decided? And how can that inform what we do next?
Yeah. So the idea of noticing, it's interesting because you're putting a nice kind of adding dimension to that in ways lots of other people think about it. So it's not just that you're in the field, maybe you're working in a state where they just introduced new policies for, say, teaching, mathematics to fourth grade students. So if you're observing a teacher working with the students, it's not just, well, that teacher just. So, and if you're reading a transcript, it's not just, or listening, it's not just these are the words that were just put forward. It sounds like that noticing is much broader than just the content, then, isn't it?
I think so. And that's a really nice way to characterize it. And actually not only characterize it, like envision it. I just felt like you laid out like a vision. And I could feel the interview moment, even though we're not talking about a specific study right now, even, right? At least not a framed up one, right? And so part of like helps me illustrate, I think, the way you just envisioned that, Ray, that for different people, you might use different verbs or metaphors for this. I mean, me, as one can see in the last paragraph of the description of the course, is I'm done studies around yoga and mindset work. I'm in a training program to become a yoga therapist right now. So for me, I'll use words like, the feel, the presence, the energy that I sense. Okay. For others, that might not be like the descriptors you'd use, but like you could use like your perception. It could be the feel you have or the vibe you get or the sense. So whatever one would put in there in terms of a metaphor and or descriptor, this course is saying that all matters a lot in the moment of being in a researcher participant relation in qualitative inquiry. All those things matter. They're not the primary thing we're chasing down. We're chasing down the issue, the research problem, the research question. In phenomenology, we of course would call it the phenomenon.
Yeah.
That's what we're chasing down. But as we're chasing down and engaging it and turning ourselves over to it, the sense, feel, perspective, perception, vibe, energy, whatever you call it, matters. And there's ways to concretely engage that mattering and noticing and sensing and feeling as, not instead of or outside of, as we're looking with data.
Yeah, it's fabulous, and it really is this expansive presentation of we use expressions all the time, right? And you're talking about yoga, you're talking about teaching, and one thing we say all the time is be present, make sure you're present, and we leave it at that. But I love the qualities, the dimensions, the components. Being present is really this broad, much broader experience as you've just presented it than, people think of that and think, oh, I must pay attention. What did Paul just say? Did I catch that right? It's like, it's much more dynamic, and it's almost like they are, right? They're in a lived experience as there are participants, whether we're observing them or, yeah, it's fabulous. It's great stuff. So, as we think about what you're putting forward, sometimes when people look at courses like this and phenomenology, they get a little intimidated because it's so minded necessarily. But it's again this line of the theoretical, the philosophical, the principles, and the practical get it done. So, in that sense, when we think about what you're putting forward and how learning from lived experience will cultivate your qualitative mind, what do you see as folks who take the course when they finish about their readiness to move forward with their work? What might be different in how their next data collection, data gathering episode goes, how their next little bit in kind of processing what happened when they were at such and such, let's say school. So how does the course really help people get ready to move forward with their work?
Yeah, great question. So the way I'm envisioning this 2-day experience is that we'll start with I'll walk people through, and I know we're going to talk about this next point in just a minute, so I won't go far into it, but a set of commitments that we're going to work through and learn about right away on day one. And I'll bring an issue, a problem, some data, a phenomenon that will work these commitments through, and it'll be really concrete. I'll bring like a study that I'm conducting myself, or one of my own advisees, or a researcher that I'm doing some consultative work with. I'll bring multiple things to the table of actual concrete studies, and we're gonna step back for a moment and go deep. So the step back is everyone will be asked to in the learning about this, let's just call it this collective engagement with a data set or a study, to see and find at least one thing that feels real concrete to them. Meaning they can see like a part of the research design of like, that's interesting and important, or they can see a bit of the interview data of like, wow, I can really resonate with that, or I had an experience similar when I was interviewing someone else in my own study. So they identify that small thing, okay, small as in concrete, they can point at it, and then we learn about and work each of these commitments. And then by the end of day one, everyone will have identified something in their own work, either an idea they have, a study they're working on, something they've just finished designing, wherever stage they're at, they'll narrow to an aspect of it that they want. And these next two words are super important, that they want and need and feel that they'd like some more confidence and or clarity on within themselves around the concrete thing they're working on, so that by the end of day two, they've taken away some more confidence and or clarity on whatever they brought at the end of day one. Leave day two having worked day two on the highly relevant aspect of their own work and research, so that they take away some more confidence and clarity. And then in the process of the 2 days, have worked the 4 commitments enough that those start to feel more embodied so that they could work one or more of those commitments later in ways moving forward on their own and apply them.
Yeah, I love it. It gives this permission slip to folks to enter in without confidence and clarity. And in fact, oftentimes that's hard to do before the project begins because so much of that comes from what you're doing. I think what we might do, Paul, if this feels comfortable for you, I think maybe we'll go deeper into the four commitments now and then return to your thoughts, Paul, about we'll get into kind of things about Mark's teaching. So yeah, Mark, you mentioned already the four commitments, and we want to think more about that, hear more from you. They're mentioned in your description and how they'll really kind of expand and enrich our qualitative minds. So if you can discuss a little bit more about how they came to be, anything else you want to add before the course, maybe teaser for people who are going to be taking the class and for people who are not, a note or two that they can take with them. But yeah, it's commitments is a powerful term. I'm, thinking more about kind of you, folks who don't know you yet, don't realize how intentional and thoughtful you are in your choice of terminology and kind of the process to get there. So yeah, I just basically am giving you permission to tell us more about coming to those four commitments and why it is that they are what shapes this class.
Mm-hmm. Great. Yeah. So I'll move fairly swiftly through these. So over the years, both individually and in some of the spaces I work, and in particular with ResearchTalk, we've had ongoing conversations about how, although phenomenologists and phenomenology is talked about as like the core at the end of the day, in this tradition is learning about phenomena in particular ways, but like the what's really underneath that is lived experience. And at the same time, all sorts of qualitative research methodologies, maybe most, if not all, are interested in some way, shape, and form around lived experience. Okay. And so for sure, phenomenology as a tradition doesn't own lived experience, right? That's that doesn't even track, right? To assume that. And though this is what kind of happens when traditions get built, right? So one of the things we've talked about for quite a while, we meaning the four of us in different ways, shapes, or forms, is that how could we have a session that, I'll draw on phenomenology some, but this is not a course on phenomenology and how to conduct it, right? This is around lived experience in qualitative research, and particularly what it's like for the researcher, right? The qualitative researcher to explore lived experience, whatever the tradition is. Okay. So that's important framing and context. So as folks can see, when you read the opening of the description, it's around the lived, felt, sensed aspects of carrying out engagement with participants, listening, observing, talking to, right? Any number of ways to collect qualitative data. And it's that lived felt sense. So the first commitment is about listening to and making sense of the lived felt sense of what we do as qualitative researchers. Okay. The second then is assuming, it operates from the assumption that even if when we're operating in a qualitative tradition that treats theory as something either that frames, or if the tradition treats theory as something more active and ongoing and less about framing, but more like opening up or helping to extend or make meaning from or make sense of, whatever the conception of how theory is to be treated in a qualitative research tradition. In this work, we're going to operate from the assumption in the second commitment is that it's an active generative process. Whenever you theorize something, whether it's the frame for the thing and you hold off and you bring that theoretical frame toward like later in analysis, if you bring it from the jump, right? And you're theorizing as you're going, you're theorizing after each and every interview, you're maybe theorizing during the interview. where something comes up from a theoretical tradition that animates the work and the phenomenon you're studying. It might inform a follow-up question in a conversational interview, either explicitly or implicitly, in keeping with that. So that's a second commitment. The third is that take up those theoretical processes very directly in our data collection. So 3 and 4, we move even more concrete, where we work in our data collection processes, we practice things, we role play, interviewing and trying out. What if I expressly infuse something theoretical here? What if I don't? What if I theorize later? And that leads to the fourth principle, is then the practice of theorizing is mostly in data analysis. And then we have particular theoretical tools that we use to theorize an analysis, all the while paying attention to what we notice about our felt sense and how it influences our decisions of moving one direction or another, or finding a middle way between directions. So there's a fairly quick washover of those 4 commitments.
It's powerful because, again, it's like, threading all this together is the necessity to think all at once about the practical of what you do as a practicing qualitative inquiry, worker, and knowing that it's not informed just by what happened yesterday. This is deep traditions, deep ideas, theory, philosophy, and practice all happening at the same time. It's fabulous. We have a question from Paul in a moment, which is pretty powerful, but I wanted just to point out, folks who are listening, I think it would be worthwhile to rewind and just mute. Mark, your nonverbal is fabulous, and it's active and it's generative, and I just, as I was watching you, I was like, invested. There he is. He's there. He's doing it, and it just seemed kind of like this energetic, and it's fun too, right? This is not just up here, right? It's kind of it is worthwhile to be invested in it, isn't it?
Oh, yes. And it would line up quite nicely, your observation, whatever people's degree of active animation when they get amped up about things, right, is part of the felt lived sense of carrying this work out, right? So imagining ourselves in our own embodiment, either in the interview moment, in the data analysis moment, outside of it, all matters.
Yeah. Yeah. So this course is new, and it's the first time we're putting it forward, but it comes from lots of stuff you've been doing in your own, you mentioned with us. So Paul just had a question about kind of that teaching experience and coming to the place you are. So let you put that forward, Paul.
Sure. So in the many years that you have taught this course and related courses, I'm just wondering how, what you've learned about presenting this complex topic, just the teaching of it and the presenting of it. What have you learned over the last 20 or so years?
Yeah, thanks, Paul. Two things in particular, and I'm going to spend more time on the second. So the first is that it's important for me, pedagogically, I've learned that when I'm directly teaching phenomenology and when I'm teaching what I'm going to be teaching in this course, I've fairly quickly, I don't know, I hope everyone's had at least this experience once, which is when you encounter something you didn't realize you'd be really drawn to and passionate about, it has a resonance and a concreteness, quite a ways before you understand many of the component parts of it. And so it's it just resonates, and it's an alignment somehow in ways you may or may not, at least I was not aware of how aligned I was with it. It's just that I just kept being in alignment. And as I learned details and component parts of it, that became more and more clear. It made learning all the components parts a little cleaner, not simple always, but cleaner. Okay. Why that? So in my first, I've learned that because this work I'm talking about today is that way for me, doesn't mean it is for everyone or some who I'm engaging with it. They're usually almost always interest in it, but that more immediate alignment will happen for maybe some in the space, and then for others, not so much. And so that's good for me to not only know, but to enact in my teaching a way to, hey, like slow me down once I get rolling. I might feel, and I likely will, that I'm being like clear and direct, and I've given enough examples, right, in order to make it make sense. But like, please, let's create a space here where you can do one of these and just say, hey, can you give another example, Mark? I feel like I understood it some. So I try to invite that early. And I learned that fairly early in my teaching, but it's about like the middle of that 20-year arc that I felt like I learned it better and got better at foregrounding it. That's one. The second one is actually taken from a phrase a colleague of mine back at the University of Georgia, who's now at Michigan State University, Dr. Amy Parks. She used to like very consistently say at meetings, at doctoral, student committee meetings, she would say, hey, we're going to do serious, complicated theorizing of this, and our methodology is going to have like a lot of components to it. But in order for both of those to happen, something has to be small. And like, you got to identify the something small that isn't complicated to you, that isn't complex and multifaceted and nuanced. Let's figure out what that is first. Once we have that and we do what we can as teachers, instructors, mentors, advisors, help you, and then therefore help us as your people surrounding you to find that something small, and then we can keep the complicated, complex twists and turns that are to come are always coming back to that small. So there's a couple metaphors very recently that and at least one of them, if not both of them, I'm going to use this summer. And I'm reading a book right now by Glennon Doyle, Abby Wambach, and Amanda Doyle called We Can Do Hard Things. And it's responding to 20 questions they posed to themselves as co-authors. And they invited a number of other humans in their life. And then it's full of all these snippets around 20 chapters of these 20 key questions. Okay. And Glennon Doyle responds to one of their own questions of like, how do I find myself? Like when I feel kind of lost and kind of out of alignment. And Glennon Doyle says, like, sometimes that happens daily, sometimes hourly. Okay. And what she said what she's learned to do over time is to identify at least one, if not more than one, touch trees. And that's coming out of what folks who, when there's advice that happens, if you're ever lost in a vast woods, don't venture very far. You're more likely to be found if you don't venture far from wherever you are. And she said the main thing they were is find a touch tree that's solid, steady, big, immovable, so that when you do go away from it to forage for food and such, you can see that touch tree still. So metaphorically speaking, what are your touch trees that are steady, dependable? You can see them from wherever, whether it's a relationship, a group, a practice, a habit, a commitment, a space or place, whatever it is. So that metaphor, like, I think is interesting and important in the teaching of what we're going to be exploring, is that I help people identify at least one touch tree, right, in their work directly, and maybe a second touch tree that isn't necessarily in the study they brought to the table, or could be, but it's just something they know they can turn to ground themselves.
Their podcast is fabulous. Have you listened to their podcast?
Yeah, a couple times. Yeah, it's really good.
Yeah, they also do a nice kind of grounding to, not to get into this, but lots of the noise that's happening in our world today. So, yeah, so if anyone's interested in kind of a team just to listen to reflect on what's happening in our world. So give their names again: Glennon Doyle,
Abby Wambach, and Amanda Doyle.
Yeah. Yeah, great. Definitely worth checking. So we're going to shift gears here as we close. And we originally were going to do two conversations today with Mark. We're probably just going to do this one because it's great. But we're thinking, Mark, about, we gave us a lot about the course, about kind of the fit of your work, just general kind of qualitative stuff. Mark Vagle as qualitative man. So Jeff is going to lead us with a question, and then I'll close us out with another.
Yeah, Mark, as you mentioned, you've been doing this for 20 some odd years. I'm going to actually add a second part to this question, but what keeps you committed to qualitative inquiry after all this time? But also, if you could just kind of take a step back and maybe tell us how your own qualitative lens has refined and evolved over the years. Hearing you talk, each time we hear you talk, I feel like you've kind of taken a step further, which is really cool. So I just kind of want to get your kind of bird's eye view of that experience.
Yeah. So the first part is just reflecting back on that arc for me, or is that the second part?
Either order. What keeps you committed, and kind of how have you evolved?
Yeah. So to be honest, the main thing that keeps me committed, honestly, is all the work I do with others around qualitative inquiry. One of the gifts of the particular role I serve, and have served for a long time, is that I keep engaging people learning about qualitative inquiry, again, at ResearchTalk, at my university, in other spaces and places. I not only never get bored by the ideas and insights and questions and studies that folks are imagining, and they're coming to get some help further imagining it, designing it, managing the twists and turns of it. But also, I not only don't get bored, I get inspired by it. And I feel like I get smarter in my own evolution. And this is a transition to the second part of the question. My own evolution is really influenced by what I'm learning from other people's insights when they're taking up the work, whether it's mine or others. It just that's where I continue to grow in a way, and that requires like a degree of and like openness that I think is also like really important to just be able to do qualitative research, is a genuine openness and curiosity of learning from research participants, right, within a study. And in this case, I'm saying, like, in particular, learning from others as they're learning for themselves. It's that learning, teaching, learning back and forth relationship that I think has just been essential. And again, back to the refining, it's refined the questions I ask. It's refined, like pressing me in a really productive way to notice. We talked about noticing at the beginning of this discussion, to just notice things I just wouldn't have noticed otherwise. And it's because someone else I was teaching, who thinks they're primarily coming, and they are, for like guidance and mentoring. And I hope they're getting that. I'm also getting it through their questions.
Yeah, it sounds like that, and you don't have to talk about this because we're going to shift to another thing. We could chat all day with you, but it sounds like that isn't just your work with research participants. It sounds like that's your classroom teaching. That's you working with people with yoga. That's you working with colleagues on a research project, or wherever it is, that seeing, feeling, experiencing those moments of the movement of people's kind of absorption of what it is that's being put forward. We have a broad question we want to close with that's kind of deep, but we just wanted to hear your thoughts on. We all do qualitative inquiry. We're all passionate about it. For everyone on this conversation, it's much more than just a job, and it's kind of a way that we experience the world. But 2026, there's a lot happening in our world. Why qualitative inquiry in 2026? Why is it critical that we not only remain committed to qualitative inquiry, but that we're doing it in a very active, powerful, embodied way in 2026?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I mean, there's been a number of times in my lifetime, and certainly in lifetimes prior, where we've gotten in a spot where um, dominant narratives and stories and storylines have become so powerful and strong that they've disproportionately influenced public engagement in ways that have moved the, like, I don't know, society, the body politic, in a way that has done considerable harm. And I'm going to draw specifically on where I reside right now, and where this university, where I'm literally sitting right now, is at the University of Minnesota, and which is a Minneapolis, Minnesota context. And one of the things that what happened here early in 2026, in particular, with ICE presence, it revealed in the response on the streets from the lived experiences of particular individuals and the response to it and the chronicling of it, although it wasn't in a qualitative research study, it assuredly was qualitative in nature. The seeing, the hearing, the witnessing, and there's if there's never been a better time, I don't know when. There has been as good at times, if not better, to do the same thing, but being able to inquire in the way we do in qualitative inquiry, with presence, with turning ourselves over to the experiences of others, regardless of type of qualitative research we're doing, for listening in particular ways, to expressing what we hear back out. I think it's powerful times to do this type of inquiry. I think that one of the challenges and the calls for us is to figure out ways to express what is learned from these studies in ways that engage a broader readership, that's accessible. I think has always been a challenge and always been a commitment in qualitative inquiry. I think it comes up with varying success, and I'm talking about my own work just as much as, if not more, than anyone's, is making it in a way and bringing, expressing it in particular in multifaceted ways that can be heard and accessed in important ways for those who are living day to day with any number of questions, concerns. And so I think the timing is even better, but the challenge is even higher, I think, to find multifaceted ways to express and share the work.
Yeah, it's beautiful. And when we think about the context we're working with at the Summer Intensive is this professional development, and people are here and they're ready to take care of tasks, and they're choosing courses based on, I got to get this done. Many of them never intended to do qual. Their bosses designed a project. And then there are others who kind of like are thinking about it and all of this. So what you just said is so poignant, to let folks know that this experience, not just your course, is something beyond just how do you get your job duties fulfilled. It really is a way to think about your place. And I love the way you put yourself as observer in context of everything else that's happening throughout today. And it's stuff that you're bringing us to points of reflection that I don't think people often do. When we teach our stuff at ResearchTalk, we have an expression, get out of your own way. And I think that's a powerful tool that in the teaching the four of us do in our own individual work, I think we kind of kindly and gently help people realize that it's not all just on you. In fact, this is a cooperative effort, and you can kind of take a real subtle facilitation role. And, people actively engaged in interacting with us as people receiving stories, they're going to give us tons. So
Mm-hmm.
today's a wonderful place to do it. It's fabulous. So
Mm.
it's always so wonderful, Mark, at so many different kind of thoughts, emotions about kind of going through. We love this time with you. So we are going to give us all a little bit of a brain rest now. We'll close off this conversation. We'll do a quick, after we finish recording, we'll just do a very short conversation separately, just the four of us, very short, and we'll go from there. But thank you so much to Paul, to Jeff, and of course to you, Mark. Love it.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mark.